Now, you're doing a bunch of these events. You and Fred have traveled around quite a bit together.
Yeah, we have.
And Bobby Gibson occasionally does some stuff with you, and Paul Pagat,
Yep.
and some other glorious individuals.
Yep.
So this year is the 130th anniversary?
130th anniversary. It started in 1883. Gosh, this could be a movie. It's a wonderful story. 1883, a 25-year-old German immigrant from Mannheim, Germany, he was married to Rosa Gretsch, of course. They had 5 children, and they started that company in Brooklyn, New York. And even when we start talking about guitars, the construction of Gretsch Guitars, it's an old school guitar building, very similar. They adopted some of the things that they discovered from tonalities. You know, they made drums first,
right.
And what makes a great sounding drum, they incorporated that into their guitars, and also extended fretboards over the body. That's a violin thing, and these were old school European craftsmen that they had hired at that factory in Brooklyn, New York. After the first 12 years, Friedrich was his name, who made his first trip back to Mannheim to visit family and pick up supplies to bring back. You know, of course, in the early 1900s, there weren't any airplanes yet.
Right.
So if you wanted to go back to Europe, you had to take the big steamboat
Right.
back. It was unfortunate that on that steamboat trip, shortly after arriving, he died.
Oh.
Friedrich died. And they sent a telegram back to his the wife, Rosa. Again, had 5 children. And, you know, back in those days, you know, the wife stayed at home and took care of the family. And she was certainly stuck with a dilemma on what to do with the company, because she wasn't really a part of it. And like they did in the old school in Europe, and you know, in that time period, she turned the company over to their oldest son. He was 15 years old.
Oh, good Lord.
And he ran the company for 49 years. And then, of course, and that was Fred Jr., who then turned the company over to, he had 3 sons, one of which is William or Bill Gretsch, who ran the company for about 7 years, who is Fred Gretsch's father.
Got it, okay.
And so that big, I've been very fortunate that big 10-story building in Brooklyn, New York. The address is 60 Broadway. You can put it on your GPS and go visit the building. You can't go inside there because it's residential,
Right.
of course. But I have had the opportunity to go visit that building several times with Mr. Gretsch, and talked our way into the building and got to go on the roof of the building. And he told some wonderful stories of being up there with his dad and his uncles, and you see across the Williamsburg Bridge, you see the Manhattan skyline.
Right.
And of course, in the 50s and in the 60s, New York was the epicenter
Right.
of jazz and music and lots of Americana musical things that were happening. But and on the same breath, I'm also going to say, so was Nashville.
Sure.
And always, when I tell the story about Gretsch, there was really 3 big explosions that really catapulted the company. Number 1 was in 1954 with a direct response to the Gibson Company. 1953 is when they started their relationship with Les Paul.
Right.
And in a direct response to not be outdone by those Gibson guys, when they were looking for somebody, Jimmy Webster, who was the Gretsch guy at that point, who was similar, did what I do for Gretsch. Everybody was saying Nashville's where you got to go, and once he got there, everybody was saying Chet Atkins. You got to check out this guy, Chet Atkins. This young, handsome guy. He was already on the RCA label. He had hit songs. He was producing other people. And it was a great relationship that really took Gretsch to another level. It was a great for Chet's career and also for Gretsch Guitars. This thing's really catapulted. And then, as previously mentioned, then of course, here comes, again, in the 1964, the Beatles hit,
Right.
and George Harrison with that Big Country Gentleman, which was also a Chet Atkins model.
Right.
Totally exploded the company.
And before Eddie Cochran would have been one.
Oh,
right?
there you go, Eddie Cochran. Again, that was during the dawn of rock and roll.
Right.
Dwayne Eddy,
Yeah.
of course, made Gretsch famous in their own right because of his tone and his style and the sound. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, by the late 70s, Baldwin had abandoned the Gretsch company, and you really couldn't buy a brand new Gretsch guitar anywhere. And then here comes new wave music. music. Everybody's cutting their hair short and wearing skinny ties.
Right.
And in that part of that whole new wave era came this three-piece band from Long Island called the Stray Cats.
Yes.
And Brian Setzer, single-handedly relit the fuse again for Gretsch Guitars, which we acknowledge that he had a lot to do with the resurrecting the brand and help, again, catapulting it globally.
Right.
Anyway, it's been quite a journey.
Indeed. Well, they are glorious sounding instruments. There's just there's nothing like, you listen to the old Chet stuff, to the Brian Setzer stuff, and all points in between, just that tone, that hi-fi glassiness with this sinuous low end. It makes my nostrils flare. I don't know if you can see that. I think that's important. Well, excellent. You're a great storyteller. You make my job easy. We're going to pause for the cause and then return with some guitars, I think, and start seeing some of these new glorious contraptions.
Let's do it. I love it.
So a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new, and away we'll go.
All right. Love guitars. Love talking about guitars. My favorite subject.
Is that wrong? I don't think so. Stay tuned.